Boys, we got a big game coming up on Friday, the first of two against Jamaica, with the men's national team eyes firmly fixed towards the Copa America. Leg one, of course, goes away. The return leg will come at BMO Field next week. But they got to take care of business, at least get a results on Friday. And thinking of the macro picture here, Garrett, the big picture, zooming out before we start dissecting, because we'll have plenty of time to do both. How important is it for Canada to make it, to qualify, and participate in this expanded and very exciting Copa America?
It's essential. They have to qualify. Now, thankfully, if they don't get past Jamaica, they can kind of go through the back door. There's another route into Copa America for two other teams, but the priority is to get there via the CONCACAF Nations League final, which they would then qualify for the Final Four if they do get past Jamaica over the course of these two games. It's vitally important, obviously, for the practical purpose of what it means to play in the first ever Copa America that's going to be combining teams from South America, Central America, the Caribbean, and North America. I mean, this is going to be a massive event next summer, staged in the United States, a chance to go out and play world champions in Argentina, the likes of Brazil in competitive games. I mean, it's a dream scenario when you don't have to book them for a large sum of money to come to your country to play in a friendly. No, this is like meaningful football and the chance for Canada to really test themselves against the best and the best in this region and in this hemisphere, this side of the world, ahead of the 2026 World Cup. On top of that, there's the financial aspect, the financial element as well. It's just such a it's just a shot in the arm, just in terms of what this can mean for the finances. To what degree that will be determined in due time, but being part of a dance in a significant tournament that's going to get significant eyeballs, rights packages that are going to be based around this event as well. It could be something that could really help the Canadian Soccer Association as well. So the on-field, off-field effects are huge. And look, next March, you want to be playing games against potentially the U.S., Mexico, whether it's Panama, Costa Rica, rather than having to bite your nails and play in Frisco, Texas, and against one of the teams that kind of don't end up advancing here from the Final Four. So there's so many reasons why this is critically important to this men's national team. They want to play big games. Well, this is the best way of going out and ensuring that. So huge. These next two games are just massive for the program.
Well, not to mention the ecosystem at large here, right? With the financial implications and what that can do. We're seeing a Canadian men's U17 team right now. We'll see the women's U17 team in action as well. And the trickle down from making it to a tournament of this scale, Gareth, it's a very good point that there's more at stake than just this program. It's Canada soccer at large. Jordo, Jamaica in the Nations League. It seems, Jamaica in this year's Nations League qualifiers, going back to the American game and what was on the line there, it seems like this tie with Jamaica might have more pressure on it. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think so. I think obviously that final for Canada, I think that was something that they earned, and it was, can you get some silverware hardware and play a great American side? We know that they fell short, but I think context is you go from a Nation League final in July, then the Gold Cup, a quarterfinal exit against the Americans. Your coach, the one who kind of deemed and dubbed the brotherhood, John Herdman, left to go to Toronto FC. And then most recently, I know it was a friendly against a great team, but we have to call a spade a spade. Like, Canada got slapped by Japan. Like, they outplayed them all throughout the park. And similar to this game, where I felt like the U.S. were just great in the midfield and kind of pick Canada apart, that's what happened all over the pitch against Japan. So I think timing has a huge part to play in this as well. And you're looking at the pressure these players might be feeling, because it's been a while now since they've had a bit of success. Yeah, they call themselves the kings of CONCACAF, but you're playing in Copa, or you're trying to play in Copa America, where you get better competition. And all the players have said it in their own way and really believe it. And you can hear it within the group that they want to play better competition. This is their chance to do it. So you don't want to fumble it. I agree with Wheels. Of course, it's not all said and done if you don't win, but you want to just do it outright. You want to know that you're in the Final Four. You want to know that you're going to be playing Copa America. You don't want to do the backdoor route. You want to just take care of business. And the first bit is making it close, or having a good result in Independence Park on Friday in Kingston, Jamaica. But then just taking care of business at home at BMO, it's just been a fortress for Canada, right? If they can go out and use that crowd and use that familiarity to their advantage. That's what you want to see. That's a step in the right direction, and that would be the bright light for, I would say, a bit of a dark few months for Canada.
Yeah, and they just need to get some good vibes back in this program, and get the public back on their side. The summer was underwhelming. Let's put it that way, and tumultuous. Where really for months now, all the headlines have been for negative off-field reasons, and the stories on the field haven't been up to the standard, the high standard that they said heading into the World Cup since that time. And beyond that, they played one game since they got dumped out of the Gold Cup in July. And that game was played on the East Coast at like 6 a.m. in the morning. Like, that's not a whole lot of football, while a lot of other nations have been playing regular games. So I kind of feel like they're a little bit off the radar right now. And this is a good way to get yourself back on the radar, playing against some very good players. Jamaica is going to be a marquee tie for the return leg. Like, even for the women's game against Jamaica, and there's a lot of Jamaican support. I have no doubt that Jamaican supporters are going to show up to BMO Field in that return leg. The tickets are priced reasonably, so there's no reason for people not to come out. So hopefully a couple results we'll get the groove back both on and off the field. On the field too, it hasn't looked as fluid, as together as it once was. Of course, an interim manager, there's a lot of reasons for that, but I think that could go a long way, just bringing the good vibes back to the program.
Yeah,
and Gareth, we've gone through some of the selection decisions from RBLO, whether we agree or disagree with the way that it's being done in terms of the old guard being the current guard and not really instituting a few more changes. And we've seen a couple due to injury: Lucas Cavallini out, Jason Russell Rowe in. But from the group that Maro's picked, if you want to give Canada the best success and you are in the gaffer's shoes, what formation do you think for this first leg at Independence Park might be most conducive to a win?
What do I think is, or what do I think he will do? I think that those two things might
Two
be
very different questions.
I have a hard time thinking that he's going to go away from playing three at the back. I think it puts Alphonso Davies in that wingback role, and I think that's a role that's preferable to Mauro Biello. Does he play Buchanan, Larea on the right-hand side? We'll see what that looks like. But I think that Biello will play some version of a 3-5-2. What do I think he should play? Ideally, I'd love to see just a standard 4-2-3-1. I think it suits the personnel of this team fine. I know that it comes with the conundrum of where to play Alphonso Davies, but I just don't think that this team has the three players at this stage of their careers that complement each other enough to make that three-headed monster at center back work to its fullest. Based on what we saw against Japan, and I've never seen it before, I'm not sure if that role suits playing in between the two, whether it suits Derek Cornelius. Steven Vittoria, is he a player that you want to play from the get-go in two back-to-back games in close succession? I'm not sure about that. And I love Steven Vittoria. What he's brought to the table and what he brings to the table is just keeping up with the pace that Jamaica has in attack. Mikel Antonio, Leon Bailey, Bobby de Cordova-Reid, Damari Gray. Like, this team plays direct. They want to play over the top. So I think that Canada needs some athleticism at the back and some legs in order to keep it up. So what I would like to see, I'd like to see four at the back. Can you play Davies at left back, Buchanan at right back? I mean, that's where they play their club football. I can't see it playing out that way for the Canadian men's national team, but that's where I think that Canada's formation is best. But I highly, highly doubt that we'll see that. Perhaps I'm wrong. Perhaps I'm wrong on it. Perhaps Jordan sees things another way.
No, I agree with you, Wheels. I think it's brave though if Biello ever played Davies as a left back.
I know.
If you can't
Do
right
it,
back.
Mauro.
Even though,
Do it.
right? It's crazy.
I would love it.
Like, I would love it as well. One thing when you're looking at those two, if they do play there, you know that they're bombing forward, right? So whoever those center backs are, and when you look at it,
central midfielders can tuck.
Yeah, but if you play a back four, if one side goes, let's say Alphonso Davies is going forward, you're asking Tajon Buchanan to tuck in and not go forward and stay.
No, I'm asking my midfielder, central midfielders, to tuck in. He can go as well.
Like, both go fair, and that's the way to do it. It's just like, are they really going to switch things around and do that? I would think that could be a long-term solution, but I feel like in a must-win game, is Biello going to change that? I think we got to look at Japan as well. Like, what was the biggest issue? And I think we could agree, like, the midfield was just overrun. You know what I mean? Granted, Japan are very technical. They're one of those teams, as soon as you try to get close to them, they're playing around you. You almost have to anticipate and get to them before the ball gets at their feet. If you try to get to them while the ball's there, they're knocking it around you. And they did it countless times in the midfield. And then also you're playing against kind of two in the midfield for Canada. And I just think they need to bolster that midfield, whether that's have David play a 10 or just get three in there so they have more bodies. But I agree with you, Wheels, in terms of the three in the back. For Canada, there aren't really three center backs that complement each position the way that they should. One, you have a Kamal Miller and Cornelius that are both left-footed, right? So that would probably play on that left-footed center back side for the three. And then really only Steven Vittoria that is like prime and ready to play in the middle of the back. We saw Cornelius. Right? I think he's a left-sided center back, and he could do a competent job there. But to own it in the middle, it's very different. Even Wheels, I'm sure you've played that spot, and even when I've played it in the center of you are really just, it's almost like you're a sweeper. You're like coordinating. You're seeing plays before they happen. You need to be vocal, and maybe Jenkins can help me pronounce his name, but Luke de Fajarol, he's a great player, but would you slap him straight in the middle? Like, maybe he's playing on the right. So it's just all these things. Basically, I don't think there are the three that have defined positions. And you're seeing Alistair Johnson, even though I think he's a phenomenal player, maybe he's more of a right back. Is he really in the three? I feel like a lot of times Canada are getting exposed. So maybe for structural purposes, you'd want to see a four in the back. Who would those four be? I just know you'd want two defenders that love to defend. Would that be Vittoria and Kamal? I think those would probably be my prime suspects to play in that spot. But BL has a lot of decisions to make because there are a lot of players, but I don't think there's a distinct way that this Canada team has to play. There are a few different variations that he could do. And figuring out the right one is obviously the biggest task at hand.
And the problem is he doesn't have time. Like, he didn't have time in Japan. He doesn't have time now. Like, these are big games right away. And that's why I firmly believe he brought in so many of the experienced players from the past, because players that don't really need to be taught the system, they already know the system. And maybe a couple players with more legs. I don't know if it will work, but I think that is the mindset behind that. And if that is the mindset behind that, then I think there's some validation in the approach.
Jordan, for the record, I would have helped you with the pronunciation, but one, I love watching you struggle, and two, you didn't assume that I played center back in that role. You just thought it was Gareth and yourself and not me.
No,
all 5'6", blaring speed, loves the time. I'm absolutely a winger. I know. I'm just taking it.
And I've asked you, and you said you're a pacey winger. Play the ball to the top. Adam Jenkins is going. So I knew you didn't play in the back. You leave that dirty work for me and Wheels.
Yes,
you're the rare bird.
I can accept that. I do love the shout though from you for Johnston at right back. Let Buchanan play at the right side of Gareth's three, and then stick Alfonso at his best position, as he is one of the best fullbacks in the world. On of these names, we're throwing out a lot of names here, but if you were to pick one, Jordan, who you think is going to be the most important to Canada's success in this match in Kingston, who do you think that player would be?
I have to go with Eustachio, because when I look at when Canada plays, the Gold Cup quarterfinal exit, the Americans were running wild in the midfield. He was someone who was consistent, but just didn't have a partner in that game to really help him, right? When you're playing the midfield and you feel like you have to be conducting the attack and playing passes forward, but then also be basically the last line of defense before you get to your defenders, it's a tall order to ask. You need someone to basically orchestrate and conduct something. So I would say Eustachio, missing him against Japan, yes, it still would have been a thrashing, but you would have at least seen a glimmer or someone that was pressing players on or calling them back. And he's such a leader in that midfield. So for me, that's the guy I'm looking for. That's the one that's going to really keep things going for Canada. And he's a huge miss whenever you don't have him in the lineup. So to have him back, it really puts Canada on the front foot.
Yeah, it's hard to argue that it's not Eustachio, just a completely different team with and without him. You can make the case, despite having Davies and David in the team and Buchanan, that Eustachio might be the most important player for success because of how thin the midfield is. For this game, I can add another player who I think is going to play a very important role, and that is Alistair Johnston. If he plays at that right back position, just watching tape, watching Jamaica play their last few games, a lot of their attacks come down that left-hand side, and they use Demarai Gray to come in with his off the left side with his right foot and create. He's a constant threat. He has years of Premier League experience behind him. He's now playing in Saudi Arabia, but he's still such a crafty player. It's a team that plays direct. He loves that movement, trying to work from the outside in. And Alistair Johnston's been playing the Champions League. Yes, his Celtic team hasn't been successful. Yes, it's been a bit of a struggle. But he's going to have to deal with another top player in that position who I think, especially in this away game, him and Leon Bailey, two really crafty players, have the ability to pull the strings. So Johnston down the right, Miller perhaps a little bit down the left-hand side. They're going to have big roles in this game, making sure that they can handle these players.
Checo, I have one more to throw out too, if we have the
buddy.
time. Like, just quickly, I think a lot of when you're looking at the Canada team, you're looking at, okay, well, who are the center backs? Who are the leaders in the back? Okay, who is the midfield? Because I think those positions are relatively thin. You have players that could maybe come in. And dare we talk about their attack? Because you're looking at
that was going to be my field for
Laird,
most important player.
right?
Can Kyle Laird be Kyle Laird again?
You're like, oh well, look at the plethora of options we have going forward as Canadians. But Tajon Buchanan, I think, is a wild card just because of the service that he could provide and the fact that he could just go by and skip by one or two players. But if you're looking at the quarterfinal as well, with when Canada played the Americans, a bit stale going forward just because of how the game was. But even against Japan as well, they need someone to infuse a bit of attacking freedom within that lineup. So Tajon's going to be huge. Laird's going to be huge to really step up and kind of weather the storm, because Jamaica's going to come after them. They need someone to really put in the goals and really change the game and how it could play out.
Do you see Buchanan just playing down the right? Just Buchanan one flank, Davies another?
I do.
Or does Buchanan play higher up the field? I'm not quite sure what that midfield, what that attacking unit actually looks like.
Yeah, but he comes in as an attacker, right? Like Davies is as a defender and Buchanan as an attacker. So you're thinking, are you playing him higher up? But I mean, with this versatile Canadian side, you can mix and match, and there's really no wrong way about going about it. But yeah, we'll see.
We shall see. Well, this next question generally has to do with team selection, I think, where you can be your most experimental, but with the players we know they have, Gareth, we've already heard that the 4-2-3-1 might be your preferred formation for this match. But if you were in charge, we gave you the tactics board for a day, the whistle, you could stomp around on the training ground and institute an outlandish experiment for this group. What would be your most out there thing that you'd like to see them try?
Well, what I think I would do, understanding that the midfield is the biggest weakness of this team, I would try Alistair Johnston as a holding midfielder. I just think it's a role in this team where there's no defined player. I think it could unleash Eustachio to play a little bit more of a free role, but he's the player I most trust in that position. Just watching his game evolve, his distribution has become very, very good. And oftentimes when Canada was working at their best under John Herdman, like Johnston would play that role. Sometimes he'd stay on the right, but sometimes he'd also come centrally as well in order to distribute and open up space down the flank as well. That's one that you got to think, if you have other right backs that you fully trust, and like I said, Buchanan for his club, who's a right back, Richie Larea, a right back, Luc de Fougerolles can play on the right side of a back three if you want. That's something long-term, probably not for these games, but would cross my mind. It's like, how do you put these pieces together in order to complete the puzzle? I think that Johnston, just based upon his versatility, what he can do, he could maybe play that role. I don't know. It might be a little bit of a reach because he's such an important player at right back for this team, but that's something longer term I'd at the very least consider.
I mean,
Gary, you're a creative man. Give me something.
Gaffer Gareth is not far off. One, Alistair Johnston did that exceptionally well at Wake Forest. Yes, I know we're talking about D1 football, but it's not like you're picking a guy who's played right back since he was 8 and he's never played in the middle. Like, he knows how to like control he knows the temperature. And you notice, Wheels, it's also about like familiarity. If you can go into midfield and you feel comfortable, of course you can perform, right? But if he played right back for 45 minutes and then you threw him in the middle, it would be pretty difficult. I don't know if this is outlandish. You guys are probably going to say it's not. But the only thing I could think about is throwing Tajon Buchanan at the 10. One, we haven't seen it. But, like, you always think about him going on the right-hand side just because he's so dangerous. But, like, almost being a bit more playing a 4-2-3-1 that we always talked about and having a 2, Eustachio and whoever else, that just sit. And then have Tajon be free and pick up the ball wherever he wants. and go at it. I guess the issue with that is you have to decide who's going to be your one up top. Is it going to be Laren, or are you going to put David on the wing? You always have to sacrifice one of them. But I just think when I look at this Canadian side, they need someone to just take risks high up the pitch at that number 10 spot. And Tajon would be a guy that would just destroy any defensive midfielder that he's going against. I put him against a 1v1 matchup against anyone.
I don't think you can do that for a number of reasons. The first one is that he's so effective playing down the wing. And the second reason would be like, well, wasn't that the role that Alphonso Davies kind of played at times? A little bit of a free role, maybe not as an out-and-out number 10, but playing in a more free role from an attacking perspective. And are you really going to tell Alphonso Davies, well, you're going to stay at left back and then we're going to play Tajon in the 10?
The thing is, I know I totally get it.
I just don't think you can do that, Jordan.
It is outlandish, but what I will say, and this is no slate on Alphonso Davies, Tajon in the pocket would do a better role than Alphonso Davies in the pocket. People will say that's crazy because obviously this guy is the best left back in the world. But left back, winger, touchline, galloping forward 50 yards. Tajon is a guy, if there's a defender on him, he's turning him and going the other way. He's better at that. And people might think like, oh my goodness, how dare I say that? But I'm calling a spade a spade. I'm breaking down what I feel those two players offer. Granted, it's still outlandish. I don't want him to play in the middle. But if I were to do something crazy, I'm throwing him at the 10.
These are just our crazy ideas. And
yeah, that was the question, outlandish.
The other one might, I don't know how crazy, same thing. I don't know how crazy it would be, but the team needs more legs in the midfield. Like we keep on saying that. If you're going to play Alistair Johnson at right back and you think you have enough cover in that position, do you consider at some point putting Richie Larea back at central midfield? I mean, this is where he was drafted to Major League Soccer. This is where he played before he converted to right back. It was weird at times, even for the Whitecaps. Vanni Sartini would push him forward. He'd float around inside, outside. Perhaps if you need some more legs, you can kind of think outside the box and maybe he can be added to that position. There's so many players that are versatile. And I'm not advocating take players out of their roles. It sounds like it that do really well and try them in other places, but it's an imperfect composition that this team has. There are clear and present weaknesses. I think that a little creativity over the long term ahead of 2026 will probably need to be applied in order to get the most out of this team.
I agree. And I go back to there's got to be a time, and it can't be that far in the future, where they do start trying some things with selection, with tactics, with roles. But we understand how intensely pressured packed this series of games coming up is. I do love the shout for the Deacons, by the way, over there, Jordan Wilson for Wake Forest. Well done on that. And my most outlandish was just going to be win the set piece battle. Can we start there? Seems a little outlandish based on how we've seen this play go a few times.